The Colosseum of Virel Prime was a giant wound cut into the planet's black crust. Around it were high stone seats, packed with crowds from the Krogar Dominion. Warriors, leaders, and nobles from over 100 worlds had come to watch the gauntlet trials, where only one thing mattered: strength. At one end of the arena, beneath flags made from the skins of extinct creatures, stood Uxar. He was almost 8 feet tall, with bronze-colored scales and 4 arms, each as thick as a grown man. His title: Champion of Rend. His record: never defeated. His face showed nothing but disgust. Across from him, walking as if heading to a grocery store, was Josh Carter. Josh wasn't small, but standing near Uxar made him look like a kid in gym clothes. His thin arena shirt hung loosely, and he wore no armor. His pale skin was covered in fading bruises and shone under the purple sun. The crowd laughed and muttered. Their deep voices rumbled through the arena. Some threw betting chips down, already sure this would be another easy fight. Just a weak human, alone, unarmed. "Do you need a translator, Earthborn?" Uxar called, voice loud enough to make the steel supports hum. "So you understand when I explain how I'll remove your head?" Josh gave a small shake of his head. "Your accent's fine, but thanks." Laughter erupted, more surprised than amused. The Krogar didn't expect wit from prey. A signal light pulsed crimson. This was the moment Josh was supposed to brace himself, prepare for battle. Instead, he turned his head, rolled his left shoulder once, and without warning, he raised his right arm, then drove it full force into the steel pylon beside him. The crack was loud, not the dull thud of impact. It was a sharp, sickening snap, like a thick tree branch being split in two. Gasps surged through the arena like a tidal wave. Even Uxar stepped forward, bewildered. Josh staggered back, gripping the arm just above the wrist, breathing hard. Pain painted his face in grim streaks. His forearm hung limp, swelling rapidly. His knuckles were torn, but it was clear to every physician watching, this wasn't dislocation. It was a fracture. Clean, likely through both the radius and ulna. And he had done it himself. The Krogar weren't sure whether to shout in derision or fear. Josh turned back to the crowd and raised his useless arm with his other hand. "Let's see if I need this one," he said, not shouting, just speaking into the stunned silence. A hush so complete fell over the arena that you could hear the whine of the wind turbines on the upper decks. Even the announcer, a retired war general known for never being speechless, let the moment hang too long before stammering, "Begin." Uxar hesitated. Josh did. He charged. With his right arm hanging uselessly, Josh ducked low and slipped beneath Uxar's first sweeping strike. He planted his left foot, pivoted, and slammed his left fist into Uxar's side just under the ribline. It wasn't a blow meant to incapacitate. It was a statement. "I'm here, I'm serious, and you're in trouble." The next few seconds were chaos. Uxar struck with all 4 arms, each movement meant to crush or rip. Josh twisted, weaved, fell, rolled. With one arm hanging dead, every dodge cost him more effort. Twice Uxar clipped him, a backhand across the shoulder and a downward elbow that grazed his thigh. Both hits left marks. But Josh wasn't there to survive. He was there to win. 5 minutes in, and Uxar's timing began to shift. He stopped overextending. His blows grew more conservative. And that was the crack Josh waited for. He feinted left, dropped his weight, then drove forward, left, shoulder first, into Uxar's midsection. It was like running into a stone furnace. But Josh kept driving. He pushed, twisted, and dug his foot in. The maneuver unbalanced Uxar just enough. Josh stepped behind the massive leg, coiled, and then slammed his heel into the back of Uxar's knee. The Krogar roared, arms pinwheeling. Josh leapt backward. Uxar dropped, half fallen, caught himself, snarled, and then lunged. Josh wasn't fast enough. One of Uxar's upper fists caught his ribs. He spun with the hit, dropped to one knee, and stayed down just a second too long. Pain exploded in his chest. He felt the crunch of cartilage, maybe a hairline fracture. Breathing turned jagged, not enough to stop him, but enough to warn him. Next hit like that, and the fight could be over. Uxar didn't press the attack. He loomed, cautious now, watching. Josh wiped blood from his lips with his left hand. His right arm dangled, fingers twitching involuntarily. "I broke this," he said, raising the limb slightly, "to show you I don't need it. Want to find out what else I can do?" Uxar looked at the human like he was seeing something ancient, something wrong. "You are damaged," the alien said slowly. "I'm human," Josh replied. "There's a difference." He rose again. This time, his stance was off. He was guarding his right side, breathing through clenched teeth. But he was up, fighting. A medical team just outside the ring buzzed anxiously. Their scans showed internal trauma. The arm was a midshaft fracture, radius and ulna both compromised. No protrusion, but definite displacement. Even worse, adrenaline was masking the full pain profile. It was sheer willpower keeping him upright. Josh circled. Uxar attacked. But this time, Josh anticipated the pattern. He dropped, rolled, and slammed his knee into Uxar's shin. A feint, again. Uxar roared and kicked, but missed. Josh landed a sharp left hook to Uxar's lower jaw. And another, and another. The arena was screaming now. Not just the Krogar, the diplomats, the watchers, even the medtechs. Josh's hits weren't just connecting, they were accumulating. The fourth punch found the nerve cluster under Uxar's chin. The massive warrior staggered. Just for a breath. But that was enough. Josh leapt, wrapped his legs around Uxar's neck, and twisted, hard. Not to choke, he wasn't strong enough, but to unbalance him. Uxar stumbled. Josh dropped off and delivered a single, brutal left-hand uppercut to the throat. Uxar fell. The arena exploded, and Josh collapsed. Not from injury, though there were plenty of those, but from sheer exhaustion. His breathing was labored, his face was pale. A medic reached him seconds later, scanning rapidly. Confirmed displaced fracture, right forearm. 2 cracked ribs, left side, multiple contusions, elevated heart rate, blood oxygen dropping. Josh, eyes barely open, mumbled, "I win?" The medic blinked. "You need treatment. Immediately." "Sure," he said, smiling faintly. "But did I win?" From the center dais, the High Commander of the Krogar Dominion stood slowly. For the first time in living memory, the champion of Rend had been defeated. The announcer's voice rang out, "Victory to the human." The last thing Josh heard before the anesthetic hit was the thunder of thousands of Krogar pounding the metal stands. Not in anger, in respect. The recovery ward on Virel Prime was nothing like the sterile hospital rooms back on Earth. The ceiling was a lattice of bioluminescent vines. The walls pulsed faintly with temperature-regulating organic mesh. And the bed Josh Carter woke up in had more in common with a chrysalis than a mattress. He blinked against the light, tried to sit up, instantly regretted it. Pain shot down his right side like an electric whip. His ribs screamed, and the pressure around his forearm felt like it was caught in a vice. "Don't move." The voice was calm, clipped, and definitely not human. A sleek figure stepped into view, her translucent skin glimmering like wet opal. Dr. Yen, Chief Xenomedical Officer for the Gauntlet Trials. Her 2 pairs of hands moved over a hovering display, adjusting Josh's vitals. "You fractured both long bones of your right forearm, tore 3 ligaments in the process, and cracked 2 ribs," she said matter-of-factly. "One of the ribs had a minor splinter. We caught it before it punctured your lung." Josh exhaled slowly, eyes watering. "So, how long until I'm out of here?" Dr. Yen didn't look up. 6 weeks for the arm to begin stabilizing. We've used accelerated bone kit gel, but we can't cheat biology completely. You'll be in a splint for at least 10 days, then transition to a brace. No lifting, no combat, not if you want to heal clean. Josh nodded faintly. And the ribs? 3 weeks minimum before full respiratory mobility. You'll be breathing shallow until then. We can manage the pain, but not erase it. She paused, finally meeting his gaze. Why? Josh stared at the ceiling. Because he laughed at me. That's not a medical explanation. No, he murmured. It's a human one. 2 days later, Josh was wheeled grudgingly into the observation hall. He wore a plain tunic again, his right arm immobilized in a rigid carbon splint, ribs tightly wrapped beneath the fabric. Breathing was still a conscious effort, especially if he laughed. He avoided doing that. Around him, the hall buzzed with subdued tension. Krogar soldiers parted for him, not with disdain, with space. They watched him the way one might watch a grenade without a pin. Commander Varen awaited him at the far end, towering, armored, flanked by 2 elite guards. You defied regulation, Varen growled without preamble. Self-injury violates the spirit of the trial. Josh shrugged with his good shoulder. Your champion mocked weakness. I showed him it wasn't the body that mattered. Varen narrowed his eyes. You disfigured yourself to prove a point. Yeah, and I won. The commander's nostrils flared. Then, surprisingly, he offered a curt nod. The point was made, loudly. He gestured to the nearby hollow screen. There have been consequences. Josh turned to look. It was a news feed. Broadcasts from across the Krogar systems. Debates, arguments, some outrage, but mostly disbelief. One anchor was animatedly explaining how Josh had fractured his own bones to demonstrate resolve. A scholar was claiming humans had unstable self-preservation instincts. Another suggested Earth be studied more rigorously for psychological anomalies. And then came the recruitment ads. Wait, Josh said slowly. Are those? Yes. Varen's voice was clipped. Multiple dominions have begun requesting Earthborn combatants for demonstration exchanges. Your actions made humans desirable, dangerous, unpredictable. Josh blinked. I'm not a show pony. No, Varen said. You're a warning. By the 4th day, Josh was finally cleared for light movement. He wasn't allowed to leave the medical facility yet, but he had access to the gym and rehab spaces. He didn't waste time. Dr. Yen watched with a mixture of fascination and disapproval as Josh, sweat-soaked, did one-handed push-ups in slow, deliberate sets. You won't accelerate healing by testing limits, she warned. I'm not testing, Josh muttered between breaths. I'm reminding my body it still has work to do. Despite her reservations, Yen monitored him closely. She'd never treated a patient so infuriatingly committed to discomfort. He didn't complain, didn't ask for stronger painkillers. He refused the stasis bed at night and insisted on walking every few hours, even when he winced with every step. What astonished her wasn't his strength, it was his discipline. By the end of the week, with his splint adjusted and swelling reduced, Josh was granted an audience with the ruling tribunal of the Gauntlet trials. He wore formal black. His brace gleamed. He still breathed like someone learning the rhythm anew. The High Tribunal, a triad of venerable Krogar, observed him with the silence of tectonic plates. You understand the ramifications of what you did, the eldest said. I think I'm starting to, Josh replied. You shifted the cultural lens of strength, another added. You exposed something we feared admitting. Josh raised an eyebrow. That pain isn't the same as defeat? The fear of weakness can be a greater weakness, the eldest finished. There was a long pause. Then the 3rd member leaned forward. We would like you to train our elite on psychological warfare and pain tolerance. Josh blinked. You want me to teach a class? We want to understand your species. What makes your kind persist when logic says you should surrender? Josh looked down at his arm, felt the ache in his ribs again. then met their eyes. Okay, but I'm going to need chalkboards and a punching bag that doesn't fight back. 3 weeks passed. Josh's ribs were healing, slowly. He could take deeper breaths now, without sharp stabs of pain. He still couldn't run, still couldn't sleep lying flat, but he was functional. His arm was progressing. The bones were knitting. Flexibility exercises had begun. The brace was smaller now, jointed at the elbow. He couldn't punch, but he could lift a cup without wincing. That counted for something. He taught 3 classes a day. Krogar recruits sat in disciplined rows, absorbing his lessons on stress conditioning, willpower loops, and mental pain mapping. He ended every session with the same reminder. You can train strength, you can build muscle, but if you never train your mind to keep going after the breaking point, then the muscle's just decoration. Most nodded, some still looked confused, but a few started asking the right questions. That's when Josh knew it was working. One night, as he was limping back from the gym, he found someone waiting in the corridor outside his quarters. Uksar, fully armored, silent. Josh stopped. Come to finish what we started? Uksar lowered his gaze. I came to understand. Josh tilted his head. Understand what? You broke your own limb. Not for strategy, not for advantage, but for demonstration. Josh gave a faint nod. To make a point. I do not understand that kind of strength, Uksar admitted. Neither did I, Josh said. Until I needed it. Uksar stood silently for a long time. Then, in an awkward motion, he placed something on the table beside the door. Josh looked at it. A gauntlet. Uksar's own. Scarred, dented. It is a mark of honor, Uksar said. I offer it to those who survive. Josh looked up. I appreciate it, he said softly. Uksar nodded once, then left. Josh stared at the gauntlet for a while before picking it up with his left hand. His injured arm still couldn't bear the weight. That it would, in time. The training compound's northern ring had once been reserved exclusively for Krogar war tacticians, but by the 2nd month of Josh's residence, it bore a new unofficial name, the Mammal Yard. It wasn't a compliment at first, but it stuck. Each morning began the same, a staggered limp down the central corridor, elbow brace adjusted, breathing deep. Josh arrived before the Krogar recruits, always earlier than needed, and walked laps. Slow, repetitive, deliberate. You're still limping, one of the younger trainees noted bluntly as Josh paced by the sparring pit. Josh didn't stop, still healing. Then you are impaired. He finally paused, glanced at the recruit, and gestured at his brace. That's the lesson. You think you fight at your best when everything's perfect. I fight knowing it never will be. By the start of the 8th week, the bone scans showed clear signs of callus formation across the fracture line. The ulna had remodeled well, the radius slightly slower but within expected healing margins. Dr. Yen replaced the jointed brace with a compression wrap and introduced resistance bands to the therapy routine. You can begin using the arm for light activity, she said, adjusting the band tension. No weight bearing, no impact. Josh flexed his wrist slowly. It trembled. Feels like it's made of rubber bands. Normal, she replied. You broke it on steel. You don't get to bounce back just because you're bored. I'm not bored. He took the band and began rotating his forearm. I'm getting ready. For what? Josh didn't answer right away, but he knew. The proposal came in through the diplomatic channels, an open challenge from the Vorik clans. Not a grudge match, not an exhibition, an official honor duel. Not to the death, but until disarmament or submission. The Vorik had watched the footage, analyzed his biomechanics, ridiculed his limb theatrics, but their tone was clipped and sharp. If the Earthborn wanted to claim mental endurance over physical supremacy, let him prove it, again. Josh was cleared for light combat, but no impacts to the arm. That meant the answer should have been no. He gave it a yes. Commander Varen met him in the prep chamber the night before the duel. He stood with arms crossed, 4 eyes narrowed. "This is unnecessary. You've already shifted perceptions." "Not enough," Josh said. "They think it was an anomaly, a fluke." "I need to show them it wasn't. You're still recovering. You're not at full strength." Josh wrapped a cloth around his ribs before pulling the tunic down. "Neither are most people when they fight. We just don't advertise it." Varen didn't argue further, but he handed over something unexpected. A curved shield plate, light alloy, human-sized. Josh raised an eyebrow. "Thought shields were banned in gauntlet duels. This one's for recovery, not offense. Strap it to your right. Let it remind them that protection doesn't always mean weakness." Josh nodded once. He accepted it. The Voric warrior Tregden stood over 7 feet, lean but coiled with Predator's tension. He wore dual gauntlets etched with family crests. His record was short but brutal. 3 submissions, 1 disarmament. 1 fighter walked away mid-match and forfeited outright. The arena this time was smaller, more intimate. Stone floor, ringed by ceremonial guards from both species. It wasn't about showmanship. This was about principle. Josh entered quietly, his gait still uneven, arm braced and shielded. Tregden laughed aloud at the sight of it. "You bring the cripple?" he asked the officiant. "I bring myself," Josh replied before the question was translated. Tregden turned, surprise flickering. "Still walking, then? After what you did?" "Barely. And yet you challenge again?" "No." Josh stepped into the ring fully. "I accept." The officiant gave the nod. Tregden lunged. Josh didn't counter immediately. He ducked, let the strike pass, and rolled along the stone floor to the right, rising with a wince. His ribs weren't finished healing. His arm was tender beneath the shield. He knew every movement cost energy, but that was fine. The strategy wasn't about overpowering. It was about outlasting. Tregden charged again, more forceful. This time Josh deflected the blow with the shield and used his left elbow to jab the Voric's exposed side. It was a quick hit, not powerful, but sharp enough to get attention. The Voric's eyes narrowed. Josh circled. The fight turned into a slow grind. Parries, dodges, well-timed movements. Tregden was faster, stronger, but not smarter. Josh kept pulling him into tight corners, making him strike at angles, drain energy. 10 minutes in, Josh was bleeding from the temple, sweat pouring, ribs aching. His arm throbbed under the shield from repeated contact vibrations. But Tregden was breathing harder. At the 12-minute mark, Josh bade a feint, dropped low, kicked the inside of Tregden's knee, and sprang backward as the Voric stumbled. No knockout, but the crowd stirred. Tyrgen roared and launched a savage lunge, fully committed. Josh met him halfway, not with force, but with timing. He dropped, spun, used the Voric's own momentum, and locked him into a chokehold with the left arm while kneeling on the back of his leg. It wasn't a human choke, not enough strength. But it didn't need to be. Tregden fought for 10 seconds, then 12, then tapped out. Gasps spread like fire across the arena. Josh released the hold, rose unsteadily, and offered a hand. Tregden didn't take it. But he rose and bowed. 3 hours later, back in the medical wing, Dr. Yen ran another scan. "You compressed the bone line," she said flatly. "Didn't fracture, but another hit like that, and we start over." Josh winced as he pulled the tunic over his shoulder. "I'll avoid it next time." "There shouldn't be a next time." He shrugged, slower than usual. "There always is." That night, Josh sat alone in the observation deck of the compound, watching the twin moons rise over the black ridges of Virel Prime. His arm was stiff, his ribs flared when he breathed too deeply, but he was calm. Huxar joined him a few minutes later, silent. After a while, he asked, "Will you return to Earth?" "Eventually," Josh said. "You could stay?" Josh looked at him. "You think I belong here?" You showed us strength we didn't believe was possible. Not of body, of intent. Josh leaned back. Then, maybe I've done my job. Uxar nodded slowly, then turned back to the moons. They sat in silence. And for the first time since he stepped into the gauntlet arena, Josh Carter didn't feel like a challenger. He felt like part of the story. The Earth Embassy on Varel Prime had once been an empty outpost, a perfunctory structure with stale air and unused rooms. But by Josh Carter's third month on the planet, it had become one of the busiest cultural hubs on the Outer Rim. Alien envoys from over a dozen systems filtered through its gates daily, some curious, some skeptical, others simply drawn by the story. A human had broken himself to win, and then, more unbelievably, had kept winning. What terrified them wasn't the strength, it was the idea. Josh stood in front of a quiet classroom inside the embassy, speaking without ceremony. His ribs had mostly healed now. He still wore a compression wrap under his tunic out of caution, but he no longer limped. His right arm remained stiff, especially in the cold, and he still couldn't clench a full fist without pain. But it was usable. Functional. Enough. Pain is information, he told the room filled with mixed-species military observers. It's not weakness, it's not defeat. It's your body telling you where your limits are. He paused. And sometimes you have to ignore it. Not always, not recklessly, but in those moments where meaning outweighs survival, you make a choice. One of the young Krogar trainees lifted a hand. But wouldn't it be smarter to avoid that kind of injury altogether? Josh smiled faintly. Of course it would, but sometimes you don't get smart. You just get one shot. Another hand, this time from a wiry Arterian envoy. Her voice clipped. Did you know for certain your arm would heal clean? No, Josh said plainly. There was a real chance it wouldn't, that I'd lose function, maybe permanently. Then why? Josh looked down for a moment, remembering. The heat of the arena floor, the throb of shattered bone, the silence after the snap. I wasn't just fighting him, he said finally. I was fighting what he represented. That strength only matters if it's visible. That pain means weakness. That if you look fragile, you are. I needed to prove something different. He stepped away from the podium and flexed his once broken arm, slowly, until it trembled just slightly. I broke this arm to make them understand that I don't win because I'm unbreakable. I win because I get up afterward. Later that evening, he sat in the commissary with a plate of rice, steamed greens, and something approximating protein. Uxar joined him, carrying a bowl of fermented root paste and chewing slowly. You never ate like a warrior, Uxar said. I like things that don't punch back. You never needed food to fight, or armor, or even balance. Only intention. Josh shrugged. Balance would have been nice. They sat in silence for a while. Uxar finally said, A new trial begins next week. The Vorki delegation has requested Earth be granted observation status for the first time. Josh nodded slowly. It's happening then? They fear your people, Uxar said. Not because of power, but because of choice. You choose to endure. That's harder to predict than strength. Fear's not what we want. Maybe not, Uxar replied. But you made them see endurance differently, and that changes everything. Josh leaned back, wincing slightly as his arm ached. You think they'll start breaking bones on purpose? Uxar huffed. No, but they'll stop laughing when someone chooses pain. The following day, Josh visited Dr. Yen one final time for his release review. She ran the scans carefully, checking bone density, ligament strength, and healing trajectory. The arm has healed within acceptable variance, she concluded. You'll have occasional pain with overuse. Avoid impacts for another 6 weeks. Strength should return with time. Use it, don't test it. Josh nodded. No more fights. She lifted an eyebrow. You expect me to believe that? He gave her a half smile. I expect you to tell me when I'm being stupid. I've already done that. Repeatedly. He slid off the table slowly, rolling his shoulder with a soft grunt. Thanks for putting me back together. Dr. Yen handed him a small clear case. Inside was the first splint he'd worn, cleaned and sterilized. A reminder, she said. He turned it over in his hand. Of the injury, he asked. Not of the choice. 2 weeks later, a diplomatic envoy from Earth finally arrived. They brought fresh uniforms, new directives, and a polite request for Josh to return home for debriefing. He met them in the upper gallery overlooking the Varel Arena. You've stirred up the sector, the diplomat said, adjusting his collar. We've had 26 new alliance inquiries, half of them specifically referencing your matches. Josh leaned on the rail. Yeah, I didn't exactly plan for that. They're calling you a psychological weapon. That sounds healthy. The diplomat offered a tired chuckle. Command wants you back. You'll be debriefed, interviewed, probably paraded a bit. Josh kept looking down at the arena. It was empty now, just the wind brushing dust in soft patterns across the stone. I'll come back, he said. To Earth? No, he said softly. Here. Josh Carter left Virel Prime 2 days later on a diplomatic vessel with minimal ceremony. No parades, no awards, just a quiet departure from a place that had nearly broken him, until he broke it first. The story traveled faster than the ship. Within a month, training centers on 3 different planets introduced new endurance curricula. Within 6, humans were requested to consult on crisis psychology. By the year's end, no one laughed at soft skins anymore. They remembered the man who snapped his own arm before a fight just to prove he didn't need it. And they remembered what happened after. Not the pain, the choice.